Guys, welcome to another exciting episode of the Mastery Podcast. I'm your host, Master Chris Palarkey, fifth degree black belt in traditional Taekwondo. And I'm joined today by another awesome guest. You guys are going to be blown away by who I bring on next. You may have come across him in your time on social media. Before we go any further and I introduce my next guest, please hit that like, follow, or subscribe button located somewhere on your screen. This person needs really no introduction. Without further ado, McDojo Life. Welcome to the Mastery Podcast, man. Thank you so much for being on today.
What up, man? And thank you for being patient while I was trying to get my coffee. I was going to have a rough start without it.
Nah, I totally understand that, man. No worries, no worries. So if some people probably know, some people don't. I try to make this as apparent to any audience or any listener that's getting on. But you run a social media page, essentially, that exposes fake martial artists, which if you're hopping into any industry, there's really three things you can do. You can either be first, you can be the best, or you can be different. I feel like you've got all three of those categories covered here. So what inspired you to get into this business of exposing the fake martial artists in our community?
Yeah, man. It actually, before I started McDojo Life, I had already been doing martial arts for a very long time. I started when I was 12 years old, and by the time I started jiu-jitsu, I was already a third-degree black belt in two other styles. And my goal before I die is 10 black belts before I pass. Wow. And I was like, in order to do that, I might want to get on the ball with one of the arts that takes the longest, which is jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu right. Takes forever. It could take anywhere between, somebody like BJ Penn, like 3.5 years, till like somebody like me, which will be like 45, 50 years before I get right? So I was at the time a striking coach at a jiu-jitsu academy, and I was also somebody who helped with their kids' classes, and I also helped with their front desk work. So I was kind of the jack of all trades.
Gotcha.
And one day I got a call during a noon class that the instructor wasn't going to be able to make it in because he wasn't feeling well. And the dude never calls in sick, so I know he was sick. So I was like, okay, I'll take over. And I taught the class that day, armbar, triangle choke, transition between the two, and then we sparred. But it was a noon class, so a lot of those guys either are self-employed or, they had the day off, things like that. So we all stood around and we were just chit-chatting after class was over, and the subject of McDojos came up, which has been a term that's been around longer than I've been even born. That's been a term forever.
Right.
And so we all talked, and then everyone left except for one guy. One guy stayed behind. It was only his second class ever. So he did the trial class, and this is like his first official student class.
Right.
And he was like, hey man, I'm a little embarrassed. I don't know what a McDojo is. Did you explain? And I was like, yeah. So I kind of explained to him what's now become the basis of the 5 rules of the page. And he was like, asked me a very basic, simple question. He said, how come there's no one that does anything about that? And I was like, started thinking about it, and I was like, it kind of hit me. I was like, that's a simple question, but I was like, it's a very deep answer, because there is no regulating body to the martial arts industry. Absolutely anyone can just open up a school and call their school, Steve's Karate and All You Can Eat Kung Fu Emporium, and then they could just open it up and they could just do whatever they want.
Right.
And so I went home that night and I just couldn't stop thinking about it. It was like in my head, like a song that gets stuck in your head.
Right.
And I started to research that night. I couldn't really sleep. And the next day I was like, after doing some research, I realized the only thing at the time that was around was something called Bullshido forums. And it wasn't really doing anything about it. All it was really doing was people complaining. And most of those people were complaining about the stupidest crap, like how long it takes to get a belt or how good someone is or skill and things like that. They were completely missing a lot of the real issues, like the fact that there's a record number of pedophiles in the martial arts industry, or the fact that people have been physically assaulted, stalked, abused, killed, extorted, shot. Like it gets so dark that it's amazing that the industry will complain about how much someone's classes cost, but they won't call out the pedophile across the street. And so I was like, maybe we need to really do something about this. So the next day I started McDojo Life.
Wow. And now 10 years, you've been running this page for 10 years from what I read. You were recently on this magazine. I got an opportunity to feature in here with you shortly after your feature, but I want to show everybody You're on the 6th issue of the Deadly Art of Survival magazine. Thank you to Shihan Ingram for posting us. And you're right here in this spread. You got a couple of pages in here, man. It looks great. I won't show everybody everything.
It is a good looking magazine. You know, what's funny too, and not to brag or anything, but the truth is I picked up Black Belt magazine the other day on the shelf,
right?
And it's very comparable. You know, for a magazine that I had never heard of, and then they contacted and they were like, "Hey, we'd like to do something, a story on you." I was like, "Absolutely!" And I was expecting something like cheesy or cheap. And when I got it in, I was like, "Damn, this is really well done.
This is legit, right?" I had the same sort of thing you did. I got a phone call in the car one day, and I was like, "Oh, this is really like the real thing." And then you check it out, you do all your research and all that stuff. But congratulations to being featured in here. I know that's a big thing. And I'm personally a fan of your work. Why do you think that your work is important?
I think at the end of the day, there's not a lot of people really looking out for this industry. The industry itself is very self-imploding and toxic. And I'll give you an example. So I went to something called SHOT Show. And regardless of what people feel about firearms, that's not really the point. But at SHOT Show, it's one of the biggest gun industry events that there is. And when I went there, they tell you before you go, it's like a week-long event. And they tell you before you go, even with that amount of time, even being there for a week, you will not see every booth. It is so big that there is no way you can actually stop and talk to everyone. And so they tell you to map out your trip. They say, hey, just make sure you mark all the booths you want to go to, have a game plan on what you want to see and all that good stuff. Right. So I went and I was blown away by how big and organized and how much money was put into it. But then it hit me. The Martial Arts Super Show, which is our industry's biggest event, is not even close. Not even like 10% of what SHOT Show is. Right. And the real thought was like, well, martial arts has been around longer than guns. Like, we're not talking just a little bit of time. We're talking like thousands of years. And people have been throwing hands long before we invented guns, man. Before a dude even figured out how to throw a rock. We were punching people in the face. So I thought about it. I was like, why is our industry not as big? And then it really hit me as like the 2A industry. There is infighting like any other industry, but when it comes down to like 2A rights, they'll band together and work together. Martial artists don't do that. If a guy across the street does a style you don't do, it's amazing how many people will talk trash about that guy. And what we forget is a lot of martial arts instructors project their own insecurities onto their students. And so a student comes in and says, hey man, I want to lose some weight. Some instructors would be like, nah, man, if you don't fight, you're not legit. Like, he doesn't want to fight. He wants to lose weight. Why are you pushing that onto him? Or like somebody just wants to have a mentor, you know, and then they go in there, they want to work out and have fun and just enjoy it. And I think fun is a big one that keeps missing people. Like that's just as important as any of the other stuff. But yet there are so many people in this industry who will basically point fingers at everyone who's not them and call it garbage. Meanwhile, those other people are doing the same. And so that's very toxic. I think that by doing what I do, what I'm really trying to accomplish here is if we can all focus our energy on the things that really matter, that really impact our community, maybe we can make it better. You know, maybe we can stop this petty bullshit. Maybe we can stop the petty BS about like people arguing so much about semantical crap that doesn't matter. Maybe we'll have less pedophiles in this industry. Maybe we'll have less abuse. Maybe we'll have less con artists. Because we as a community are now protecting it instead of being so divided. Well,
that's a beautiful way to break that down too. And again, I've had many martial artists on the show, and I haven't had yet anyone, which is why I specifically reached out to you. And I've been, like I said, I'm a big fan of all your stuff that you post, and very comical too. I've watched you kind of get into it on the lives. And hey, if you want to get on, you know, I'll talk with you, and you certainly live up to what you say. You know, so the people that get called out essentially, you know, take offense that you call them out in the first place. But if you're looking at some of this stuff, a lot of it is like how. It's not even realistic, right? In the world that you and I both live in. Like, it sounds good when you write it as a story for a movie, but in reality, you're going to get somebody killed. What was the guy that was, he was trending for a little while. He was a police officer or something like that. And he was teaching these kind of crazy techniques.
Dale Brown.
Yeah. So it was like, I don't call anyone out, but I'm looking at it. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't work. Like, I don't, and I'm sure you went like way further into detail than that because thousands of posts that you've done. But I've seen the exchanges, like you really walk the walk with these people and make sure that you kind of oust them in essence. I wonder what you think about what the importance is of being a good instructor, and not just a good instructor, but being an advocate for the community, this particular community.
For sure. Well, I think that the key to being a good instructor is to put your ego aside and not care about what your goals are, but to care about what your students' goals are. Right. And I'm a big advocate for students, obviously, making sure that they're going to safe environments and they're being treated right. There is a lot of cult-like behavior in the martial arts industry, and it's a fine line. I'll be honest, like it's a really hard line to walk as an instructor.
Yeah.
You're automatically in a position of power the moment you open your doors. Because when someone comes to you, one, they have to admit that they have no clue what they're doing.
Right.
Or if they have experience, they have to at least admit to become one of your students that you're better than them in some way or can help them reach their goals. And so you automatically start at this position of power, of authority over your students right off the bat. And if you look, like, I'll give you like an example of how close cult-like behavior is to martial arts industry. So like, look at a Catholic mass. Now, I'm not a religious person myself, but my best friend, every year we go to Catholic mass for midnight mass for Christmas because that's what his family wants. And that's like my extended family. So I always go, right?
Gotcha.
So we get all dressed up, look good. We wind up going to Catholic mass. And I noticed over the years of doing it that there's a lot of similarities between a Catholic mass and going to a martial arts facility. Like the first one, right? Sometimes when you walk in, depending on the particular church you go to, sometimes there's some holy water there and you do like the anointing thing. I don't know exactly what it's called, right? And then you're allowed to walk forward. Right. Well, some martial arts schools, they make you bow at the door.
Correct.
Okay, so that's like the equivalent, but it's just like that church thing, because not all churches have that. And not all martial arts schools require that. Right. So, okay, you move forward. And then when you go to a Catholic mass, there's like a pew. And so when you get to the pew, a lot of people take a knee and they do the same thing. Then they go on. Well, that would be like our mats, right? You bow before you get on the mat.
Yep.
And then you have one figurehead who's at the front of the room and everyone else is at the other end of the room. One person is giving information. The other people are receiving the information. All right, that's similar. Behind someone who's teaching a mass is usually a stained glass, a statue, or a picture of Jesus Christ, right? Behind a martial arts instructor is usually a picture of their instructor. Right. And then what do? Right. We bow and stuff like that. At the end of a martial arts class, everybody shakes each other's hands. Usually there's some kind of like respect given to each other. Right. Well, during a Catholic mass, there's a spot where you stop and you stand up and you look around at people and you shake each other's hands. Hey, nice to meet you. Right. So what I've noticed is the only real difference between a cult, a religion, and martial arts is the intent of the leader. So in order to be a good instructor, you really have to recognize these differences.
Right.
A martial arts class, the goal of the instructor is to better their students through the medium of martial arts. Whatever their goals are, you're using martial arts to help them get there.
Right.
A goal of a religion, whatever the religion is, should be to better the disciples through the use of religion as the medium.
Right.
The goal of a cult is to make whoever's in charge of the cult bigger, better, stronger, faster, the person who's getting all the reward.
Right.
So if you have a martial arts school and you're helping your students, you're a good instructor. If you have a martial arts school and the only person that's getting benefit is you're running a cult.
Right. That's very interesting. And also to convert and retain that membership, right? There's those two big factors, which you could see in many different places like a gym. But those are I think those are great parallels that you make. And it's really odd because yesterday, I forget what time in the afternoon, I literally thought about the comparison. I said, what's the difference? I'm literally just walking in my house. I'm just walking like, there's really not much of a big difference. Martial arts is almost like a religion in and of itself. And that's not the first time I've thought about it that way. But it's when people, like, even when people come in the door, right? And I've gotten, hundreds and hundreds of messages from so many different people that I've taught throughout the years. I've easily taught 10,000 people in my lifetime. And when people tell you how you make them feel, it's like kind of going into that Jesus Christ sort of aspect, that Reiki energy feeling, right? Like, you made me feel, like when you have a big class, which I'm sure you're more than familiar with, like you have to be emotionally intelligent. You got to be able to notice the guy that's getting ready to drop dead, or the person that's in the back rolling their eyes. And you got to sort of like figure out how to get all that going while still, maintaining the quality of the classroom, but, making them want to come back, right, to you for the information. Even though you may have done front kick with them yesterday, it's not going to be any different today, but, it sort of is depending on which instructor comes to the class, right?
Yeah,
so,
or the mood of the student, the mood of you,
Right.
It's one of those things where I think where a lot of instructors fail themselves, not fail their students, because the intent is not to fail their students. They go above and beyond for their students, but they require so much more of themselves because the students are asking them to be that thing that they're not. So like sometimes people think that you're going to be their dietitian. It's like, I'm not a registered dietitian. You're asking the wrong guy. Sometimes people think that you're going to be their strength and conditioning coach. I'm not certified to do that. Sometimes people think that you're going to be their psychologist. Like, I'm sorry you have problems at home and I'll do the best that I can to help you. But at the end of the day, you need to see somebody who's a professional. So all this pressure is put on martial arts instructors to be something they're not. But what's weird is we would never do that for any other job. You would never go to a cashier, right, at a Walmart and be like, hey, man, I had a rough day. You got 5 seconds to talk. That would be weird. You never do that. And so I think that martial arts instructors are either put on a pedestal, or instructors feel they have to live up to this image that students have created of them instead of just being real about the situation. And the situation is very simple. You're providing a service in exchange for pay or non-for-profit. That's it. That is absolutely it. People want it to be this bigger, better, bolder thing. And it can for the individual. The individual can have these deeper meanings and experiences. It's up to us to teach them how. It's up to the individual to find out the why. That's on them.
I totally resonate with that. I feel like, however, what we teach, and I primarily teach Taekwondo. I also teach Hapkido and boxing here. And I run, I'm independent of anybody else. I do my own thing, hole in the wall in Belleville, New Jersey. So CMTKD. But, I've been doing this a long time. And really, I feel like through the pandemic, I really got an understanding of, because, they give you the master rank. And, I'm like, that's cool. But like more important for me is, am I living up to that by every week? Am I because, maintaining your rank is a lot harder than getting it. Somebody said that to me a while ago, and I was like, yeah, like this is years and years before I got my black belt. Now I'm saying, like, yeah, it's much harder to do that, to maintain it than it is to acquire it. But
for sure,
when
they call it the black belt belly. Like, you get that black belt, and then you're like, I like these sandwiches.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. So it's like, you have to, and you're walking around and you're actually seeing, right? A lot of the times you see, even with that example there, you actually start to understand functionally why you can't have a belly and be effective, right, with self-defense, because it's in the way. You can't lean back and kick if that thing is there, right? So it's like, plus you're the image, right? You're the first thing that I'm the only instructor here. So I have to keep myself a particular way, and whether I'm going on vacation or whatnot, I got to be conscientious of my image now, not just hygiene and all that other stuff, but am I preaching something, which I've always been big about? I don't want to be hypocritical, right? When I teach, if I'm teaching something, that means I did it that day, or I have done it a million more times than everybody else. But I wanted to wind sort of back to something that you had touched on that I think really hit a nerve for me, which is the amount of pedophiles you say are in the martial arts community. Can you speak a little bit more on that? Because I know for myself, I didn't know that there were as many pedophiles in this community and I've been doing martial arts 3 decades. So,
I mean,
talk to me about
I do news stories every week. I call it McDojo News. And what I try to do anyway is I try to find news that's about the martial arts industry, whether it's good, bad, and different, but it's about martial arts and it's newsworthy stuff. We're not talking about like local hero wins like MMA championship, like not like that kind of stuff, but stuff that's different. And excuse me, I have it right here.
No worries.
Just the last couple days. So this is just from the last week. All right, just to give you an example of what's going on in the martial arts industry. Former UFC fighter charged with second-degree murder after Laval home invasion. Next, Hampshire children's entertainer and martial arts instructor jailed for string of child sex offenses. Martial arts instructor accused of sexually abusing 13-year-old boy after parents see messages calling him babe. She billed for bogus karate school students in South Florida. Now she's a convicted felon. Former national wushu athlete claimed trial to 10 counts of sexual assault of a minor. That is literally just yesterday.
Wow. That's disturbing.
So, yeah, it is, right? And again, this is why I'm a little blown away by why people have this petty infighting in martial arts, especially online, but online's online. But they have this petty infighting about the stupidest things.
Right.
But they'll ignore these stories.
Not
people will share all kinds of news stories, right?
Right.
But then when it comes to this stuff, for some reason, they get real tight-lipped. If you type in next week in Google and Google search martial arts arrested, karate arrested, taekwondo arrested,
right,
I can almost guarantee you will find that there was a martial arts instructor who molested a child. And so I think one of those things is that martial arts gives you this automatic position of power whenever you're the instructor.
Yes.
And so obviously people who are pedophiles are going to want to be around children. And so going to a job that allows them access to that is good, but for them anyway, for their weird needs. Right. But it also is one of those things where people give this weird amount of trust. Like I see behind you tenants, right?
Yes.
And so those aren't necessarily true. I mean, it's something that we can strive to, but a lot of people who've never done martial arts automatically assume the instructor has these integrity and honor and respect. And
not always true.
I mean, that's not true. That's not true at all. Right. And so because people have this perceived notion of what martial arts is when they walk in the first time, they just automatically give all those virtues to the instructor before getting to know them. And that's when you have stuff like this happen. So I wish it wasn't the case. I hate covering these stories. I absolutely hate it. But I think that it's important to show the world that it's happening, because what I hope is going to happen is if I get a big enough reach and impact, that people will start to second guess what they're doing, look in a little deeper about their instructors, make better decisions about when they go to a martial arts facility, not just dropping off their kids and running away and leaving their kids alone with someone they don't know.
That's crazy. I have kids. I have 3. So, and I train all 3 of them here. You know, my oldest son is a black belt. My youngest son is a green belt, blue belt, and my daughter is just kind of getting her start with me. And I've been it's mandatory in my house to some degree. Like I say, every subject, right? We have to, if in every academic subject we have to learn like a certain amount, right, in order to sort of like fly into life. Why shouldn't you have a little bit of self-defense in your background? Especially seeing as how I'm in the basement, right? So it's like, it's scary because, you know, martial arts has made me very aware, and I really put these tenets up behind me because they are a reminder for me when I walk in here to make sure that that's going on off the mat. I always talk about what's going on off the mat here, because of course I can do everything and teach you kicks and punch. Anybody can do that. I tell people that's not what makes this place different. It's the message behind why I'm teaching you what I'm teaching you. It's multi-purpose. So it's not a salesmanship presentation. It does help, right? Of course, we don't do that as instructors and keeping it real, because we're doing the same thing here. It does help sell, but this was given to me by someone, and that was given to them by someone, and that was given to them by the founder. My teacher, who's over there in the far corner, Grandmaster Kim, who's a 9th degree black belt, was an actual student and bodyguard to General Choi, like the actual founder. And he travels on the ITF demonstration team, like big deal. But again, you said something important within the mix of all that, because now martial arts isn't even our conversation. It's who is the person behind the belt.
For sure.
That's really huge, because so many people, like you say, get awestruck and you're like, oh, wait, I don't get caught up in what makes this place different so much. I'm like, come take a class, because that's going to speak more. Just take a class, because I'm not going to sit there and talk to you for 20 minutes. I can, but then I have a podcast for that. So you can listen to that, but then you can see what the difference is here. You see that I'm interested, and especially having my own children, like I'm interested in making sure that this place is always a safe haven for people. If we want to leave them for an extra half hour, I'm going to treat them the same way I would treat, my own children. So you don't have to worry about that. But, it's like, I'm flabbergasted at how many people don't know that this is going on, because none of this is mainstream. I speak about this often, making the difference. And now I feel foolish because I always talk about boxers making it into the news for domestic stuff, and we get in trouble at the bars a lot more. That's what's like, put into the mainstream. But I was like, you oftentimes don't hear martial arts like 50 degree black belt, 60 degree black belt getting into fights. But they are, right? They're doing other things that aren't being pushed to the front? Is your goal to try to shine a bigger spotlight on these guys and just sort of get them ousted so people can be?
Absolutely. It's a really fine line because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I'm not necessarily trying to ruin their life.
Right.
That's not the point.
Right.
It's actually not about them at all.
At all. Yeah.
At all. It has nothing to do with them other than the fact that they're instructors in a position of power who have done some really ruthless, dirty, and
Yeah.
egregious things.
Yeah.
It's about the students.
Right.
I want to give students the information. That way they have as much information that they can in order to better make a more educated decision when they go into a school. So when they go into the martial arts school and they know that, for instance, David Arnbeck, who's a second-degree black belt under Hickson Gracie, he molested a 15-year-old girl in his home. He pled guilty to molesting a 15-year-old girl in his home. And that plea deal that he took allowed him not to be put on a sex offender registry. And so because of that, he still runs 3 martial arts schools today called Warriors Cove MMA. And so he's just one example. I mean, you can look at other places like a story called Dojo Pizza. And Dojo Pizza was a pizzeria / dojo, which kind of sounds like a novelty. But what he was basically doing was he was using the pizzeria to give underprivileged children food, was his original thing, right? And everybody in the community loved this dude. Meanwhile, he was giving free classes to underprivileged kids as well. And then slowly but surely, he started grooming the children and the parents, and he started to get the parents to sign off to allow him to have custody of these kids. So he wound up having custody of like 8 different kids that he had these parents sign off their rights to. Yeah. They were living on site, which was in dilapidated conditions. Yeah. A parent who was actually a paying member had showed up one day and noticed that the building was a little destroyed. Right. So she winds up calling the city about this because I guess he wasn't fixing it. Right. When the building inspector comes in, he's allowed in every room. Right. So he winds up going and he winds up seeing guns, just firearms, just kind of laying about in quarters where children would be. Right. And so she winds up calling, or the building inspector calls the police. Police come in to raid the building for unsafe conditions. And when they discovered that on his laptop, he had been molesting every one of those kids for a very long time. Wow. And so they found child pornography, all kinds of stuff. If you look up the story, it's absolutely insane. It's called Dojo Pizza.
Dojo Pizza. Okay, shout out to Dojo Pizza. That's really sick. This is like, I know it's like the dark alleys of kind of what we do, and you know we're again in those positions of power that you talk about. Again, going back to sort of even that analogous reference to church, right? Like being in that position, you know, walking into anywhere, right, where you don't have the information, you don't have any information, you don't have any say practically, right? The only thing you can do is give that person your money and your time. And trust automatically sort of like shifts, right? Like I'm going to have to, if I want to learn something, this person clearly knows something. And then it seems like power is very corruptible, right? Like, you know, people are, right? So it's like, I haven't seen it as often as you have in my personal life, but I always have a good sense, or at least I feel like I do, of who's in front of the room. I can tell. I'm always very skeptical anyway. But it's really saddening to hear that there's so many of these kinds of stories out there. Like, you know, you're putting kids in positions where they're supposed to be looking up to you, and you're taking full advantage of them psychologically, right? And physically, which is just sickening. But I don't really even know what to say that, but I want you to continue doing your work on that. Yeah, it's great stuff. What you're doing is absolutely phenomenal. I really do appreciate what I've been seeing. I did notice a lot of those things. I think I saw something on Cain Velasquez from the UFC. I'm not really sure what the full story is on that. I have to do some dig deeping, but I think you have it on your page. I'll check it out. I wanted to circle back to you in terms of how you got your start in the martial arts as well. Can you give us like sort of a short synopsis of what happened? I read what happened in the mag, but I was going to let you sort of take it from there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, when I was a kid, you know, when I was born with a cleft lip and palate. So I have scars on my face. And when I was going through school, I was picked on and teased mercilessly. And then one day in 8th grade, it kind of came to a head where a group of kids jumped me outside a gym. They stabbed me. I actually still have like pencil lead marking in my finger from a kid trying to stab me with a pencil. They kicked me in the face. I had glasses, so it cut my face up when my glasses broke. So I was getting pretty beat down. It's like 5 or 6 kids doing it. And I remember laying there and I was like looking up while I was laying on the floor getting stomped out, and I saw two teachers standing there doing nothing about it. They just stood there and watched. And the kids beat me for 5 minutes. They beat me from the time the bell rang for class to be out till the next bell rang for the next class to be in.
It's a long time.
And it was a while.
5 minutes for people who are listening. 5 minutes fighting is a long time.
And 5 minutes losing is even longer.
And that's even longer.
But after the second bell rang, they all ran away. And a friend of mine who was late to the class, I could see him like off in the distance, and he was coming up, and he walked up, he helped me up, and he walked me to the nurse's office, and he handed me a card, and it was a card for a martial arts class, like one of those free trial classes.
Right.
And he said the words, "You need this." And I was like, yes, I do. And then so like I went back home that night, talked to my mom about it, and I was like, hey, I'd really like to do this. My mom is not one to say maybe. She's a yes or no person. But that night she said maybe. And she had never allowed me to do any other sports because she was worried that if I got hit or hurt, that I would have to redo some of my surgeries, which at the time was completely a true thing that could happen.
Right.
And then that next month was my birthday, and my gift was she paid in full for an entire year for karate classes. And that night on my birthday, I was in class. It was my first class. So every year on my birthday, I celebrate another year in the industry.
I love that. Love that, man. Love that. Do you train on your birthday as well? Like I do. Every year I make sure if I haven't done it, I make sure that day I'm doing something.
It just depends, man. Like, I've been at this for 25 years. So it's like, every year that rolls by, I just kind of go with the flow. Like if there's a class going on, I'll go to the class. If like there's nothing going on, then I'm like, all right, I'll go hang out with my friends or something. It's like,
I love that, man. I love that. You have a very genuine energy too. I love that. Any future plans for McDojo Life? Anything big coming up? Anyone you want to shout out as we sort of get to the conclusion of this episode here? Anything you want to say about what McDojo Life has meant to you, and I guess any future plans?
Well, first of all, I'm grateful for all the people who support what I do, because it's a very thankless job most of the time. And for every person I call out, I have to deal with all of their followers. I have to deal with them. I have to deal with possible legal repercussions depending on what I'm doing, what I'm talking about. So it's like a very stressful job. But when I get people who were grateful for what I do and say thank you, that means everything to me. So the support is truly appreciated, because I would not do this shit if it wasn't for people who were helping in some way. But coming up, we actually filmed a documentary about fakes, frauds, phonies, con men, and pedophiles in the martial arts industry.
Great.
And so we filmed that for about 3 months at the beginning of last year. We're now working on distribution. We finally got picked up by one of the top 3 talent agencies in the world. They literally start shopping our film around to different networks starting next Wednesday. And so once they start shopping it around, our ultimate goal is to get more funding. And we're kind of teetering the fence between if we want it to be a documentary or a docu-series. Gotcha. A lot of people now have been saying, dude, you got to turn this into a docu-series. People would love it. Right. So, but the problem is like, we're talking rather than like $800,000 budget, which we're asking for the movie, we're now talking about millions of dollars for a budget. So we'll see what happens. But at the end of the day, I hope that once that documentary comes out, that people can look forward to seeing it, that hopefully it'll open up a lot of people's eyes outside of the martial arts industry. So that way, when they do go, they have more tools and they're better armed with information to pick a good instructor, to make sure that they're in a healthy environment and a safe environment, especially for their kids who are in the arts.
Beautiful, man. That's an amazing, amazing plans, amazing message. Again, you're in the 6th episode. If everyone's looking on Deadly Art of Survival magazine, which is the #1 martial arts magazine in the world by Shihan Ingram. So you can find you here in this magazine. Yo, I had a great, fantastic time talking to you, man. I really learned a lot. Not many conversations with people are conversations where I pick up something new. This was completely something new about something that I love to do. I just love martial arts. I love giving people a great experience. It seems like you guys are all about that over there. So keep going. Yeah, my full support. Thank you for doing what you do. And this is the end of our podcast, McDojo Life. Rob, thank you so much. We appreciate you, man.
Thank you.
All right, we're out.